Hello and welcome. This is Jennifer. I'm so glad you're here. Today I have 3 interactive cards for you. Now, if you've never tried an interactive card, I encourage you to do so. It's a really fun way to make a unique card and stretch your supplies. I've done many videos in the past and various types of interactive cards, and I will put a link to my playlist below if you want to check it out, and I'll put it here at the top right. But today I have 3 additional unique interactive cards. Now the first one requires a specialty die set, but it's brilliant and I think you'll like it. The second 2 do not require a specialty die set, so stay tuned for those. They all work a little bit differently. Okay, let's get started. The first card is this one that you see here. I thought it'd be best to share the completed card first. So you just slide open these plain windows and you can see clouds and sentiments underneath. As I mentioned, I used a specialty die set for this card. However, you could probably figure it out on your own, and I will be using that same die set for a different card version later in this video, just to get more from the product. So this is the Concord & 9th Plain Amazing stamp set and die set on the left and in the center there. And this allows you to create this interactive card and much, much more. And you'll see more of that as we go. I really like that Concord & 9th does a great job designing products so they can be used in many different ways and easy to use. I will also be using the new Concord & 9th Cloudy Double Card Front. This is a brilliant die. You can cut an A2 panel either horizontal or vertical with this, so you can have your clouds going horizontal or vertical. They also have a stripe die like this that was super popular, and I'll be using it later in this video. Okay, so let's get started with this first example, and this one is so much fun to put together, and I can't wait to think of ways to use these products with others, and I will share one example of that today. So this is the first die in that Plain Amazing die set. It allows you to cut 4 windows on a horizontal A2 card panel or 3 on a vertical. So you can do either way. This A2 panel is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I decided to make a vertical card, so there are 3 windows. I appreciate that they designed the die so the spacing is just right and it cuts all the windows at once. And I just used a T-ruler to kind of make sure I got it straight, but honestly you could eyeball it if you want to. Now I got a lot of questions about this T-ruler. This is a 6-inch T-ruler I've been using lately. It has lots of measurements marked on it, and the T part has measurements, so it's really helpful. And I will put a link below. A lot of people were asking about it. All right, so I decided to put these 3 windows right about the center of this panel, using the T-ruler to make sure I got it straight, and then run it through my die cut machine. At this point, I decided to trim a little bit off the top, bottom, and sides so that I will be able to put this on an A2 card with a bit of color showing around the outside edge. So I'm trimming this to be slightly smaller than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Next, I'll use that cloud die so that I can create a cloud pierced pattern on our background, and I'm using it in the vertical position, and there you can see the pierced cloud pattern. I think it's just fun that it adds a little bit of detail to it. Next, I used the rectangle die included in the Plain Amazing die set to cut 3 of these rectangle pieces from white cardstock. Now notice that they really put a lot of design thought into this, that it has little score lines and little notes where you should put the glue, and those dotted lines that are kind of in an oval means that's where you'll do your stamping, and that's the area that will show through the window when we put this together. I appreciate that the die makes these markings so that it's easier for us to assemble. So you can see those little faux stitch marks that mark an oval shape. Now that oval lines up with the window that we've cut on our background, so you'll see that's what's going to be showing through. So we need to stamp within that faux stitched oval. I have my MISTI stamping tool, and inside of it I have my Waffle Flower grip mat that provides a little bit of grip to hold our paper as we do our stamping. Now if you want more stick, I would recommend using like a Brutus Monroe sticky mat. This has less stick, however it holds things in place and is easy to remove that paper. It sticks very strongly to smooth surfaces such as glass or stencils or the inside of our MISTI stamping tool, and has just a slight grip on cardstock. And you can see it's holding these die cuts in place, but I can easily take those die cuts off when I want to. Now I am stamping with Concord & 9th Harbor ink, which is a beautiful blue sky color. And I am just lining up my die cut right into the green grid lines of the grid mat that I have behind my grip mat. If you want to learn more about this grip mat, I'll link to a video up here on the top right. Now you could go about doing the stamping however you want. It would be a little more difficult to put this cardstock all the way in the corner of the stamping tool because this stamp goes right up to the edge. So that's why it's nice to have something that kind of grips my cardstock and holds it in place as we stamp. All right, so I have stamped 3 of the windows from the Plain Amazing onto each of these white rectangles within that faux stitched area. I thought it'd be fun to also add sentiments into these window areas so that when you open them, you see additional sentiments. I went back to this older Say Thanks Concord and 9th Turnabout stamp set. Now this is one of those Turnabout stamp sets where you stamp it once, rotate it, stamp it again, rotate it, and do that 4 times to create a background. However, I'm not using the Turnabout. I'm just using some of the smaller thanks sentiments that fit nicely inside of this window. So this is a great opportunity to dig through your old supplies and find things that work well with this particular die set. Now, one thing I got questions about with this grip mat from Waffle Flower, yes, you can still use your magnet if you want to. If you really want to be sure it doesn't move, you can use that magnet. It does stick through the grip mat. Also, a lot of people asked if the grip mat is like a gel plate. It's not, and I will put a link below to a description on how it's different. Now for this last one, it says I just cannot say thanks enough. I cut I just off. So it's a bit smaller and it just says cannot say it enough or something. It says something like that. I just cut the top off just to make the sentiment a bit smaller and a little more playful. Don't be afraid to cut your stamps because it's a great way to get a different expression from them. I will now also stamp a sentiment on the bottom of our card front panel. Now I already did the piercing clouds on this and I'm stamping on top of it. So you'll see that faux piercing through part of my sentiment. I should have stamped before doing the piercing, but I didn't think of it. So I'm just using a black pen to fill in those faux stitch areas so we have a more solid sentiment stamped on our background. Now I did consider stamping this little plane with the heart trail like the example shows on the back, but I decided to save that and stamp that in the inside of the card later on. Now we can put together our pieces. So there is a die in the Plain Amazing die set that cuts this open little window, which is the perfect frame for the windows on our card. So I'm gluing those on front. These are cut with Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock, which is a light gray cardstock. And it's nice because it gives a little bit of contrast against the white. All right, so next we have these funny looking die cut pieces cut from one of the dies in that Plain Amazing set, and you need 3 of those. Now, once again, you can see there are score lines and it tells you where to put the glue. And then those 2 funny looking little loops there, those show you where to put the handle of the windows, which we'll do later. Now on all 3 of these pieces, I'm folding back along the score lines. So you end up with pieces that look kind of like what you see here. And then we're going to glue those flaps together. So I will put glue just on that little area where it says glue. You could use liquid adhesive or 1/4-inch tape, which works perfectly and fits nicely in that area. So I'm putting a piece of tape on each of those little glue flaps. Then I will remove the release paper and fold those closed. So what you end up with are like 3 sleeves or 3 flattened sleeves. It's open at the top and the bottom. And this is what creates that interactive feature. So I did the same thing with the other 2. So I end up with these 3 sleeves and then those 3 rectangles with the windows stamped on it. Now there are a lot of details you can add or take away to putting this together, but you know me, I love the details. So notice there are those 2 little marks on the front of the sleeves. I put liquid adhesive between those 2 marks. And then there are these little die cuts. And there's a die in the set that creates these. And these are the handle that will slide the window up and down. So I'm gluing 1 on each of the sleeves in those little markings. And this is the fog cardstock, so it's that light gray. I will put 1 on now, and I ended up putting on 2 additional layers later just so the handles stick out more and it's easier to grab onto. But for now, I just put 1 on and I'm going to give that a bit of time to dry. This next step is also optional. I have this older My Favorite Things interactive labels set. I use this a lot and I have for many years. It has lots of words on it like push, pull, spin, whatever. So whenever you make an interactive card, you can stamp that little instruction word on it. So on one of these sleeves, right above the window handle, I am stamping slide. but I'm stamping it in a very, very light ink. Now this is Simon Says Stamp Fog ink, which is super light. I'll just stamp it a few times to make it a bit darker. That way the recipient will see the word slide, but it won't be distracting in the overall card design. I will also stamp a tiny little arrow that's pointing up. But I think you could totally skip this. I think the recipient would know to slide it. After showing the card to my family, they seem to agree also. Now here's where I'm putting a second layer and a third layer of the handles on each. Sorry, my head gets in the way there, but I want to make sure that I get them layered just right. Now we can glue everything together. I'm going to take my first window panel, so the first rectangle that I want to show up on the right-hand side. So behind that right-hand window there, I will slide that sleeve over it that has the slide word stamped on it. So it slides over just like you see here, and you can see it moves up and down nicely. Now this is going to go behind that window there. I'm going to circle it just so you can remember. Now you could work on this by gluing it from behind. I think that's how Concord in 9th shows in their instructional video, but I do mine a little bit differently, and I think this just helped me to make sure I got everything lined up. Now remember, there is a little score line there. I'm going to fold on it. You don't really need to fold, but it helps you to see better where that line is. And right on the word glue, right below that score line, I'm putting a strip of that 1/4 inch double-sided adhesive. So now there is glue right there on the word glue. All right, so now I'm going to slide the little sleeve up so I can see my stamping. And I'm lining this up behind that third window there. Remember, there are those faux stitched little dashes created in that oval shape. I'm lining up those faux stitched dashes with the opening on the window. Super easy to line up. It's the right size. Then I'll press that bit of glue, that glue flap, down onto the back of my panel. So you can see it's all flat in there. It's not folded over, it's just flat there. All right, so now you can see how this will slide up and down. Now we just need to put glue on the top flap, because on the other end of this rectangle, you can see it there, it says glue. So I'll put glue on that little flap. You could use liquid adhesive if you want, you just would have to give it time to dry. So now you can see there's glue on that, and then I will flip this up and just press it down. So none of that white rectangle is folded, it's all flat there, and it's glued along the top and the bottom, and now look at our little window can slide up and down freely. I will do the exact same thing with the other two windows. So let's do the second one so you can see it again. I slid the sleeve onto our stamped piece, put strong adhesive on that little bottom flap where it says glue. Now I'll just slide the little sleeve up a little bit so we can see our stamping. I'll line up that faux stitching oval edge with the opening of the window. It lines up very nicely. Then I will press that adhesive on the back down. So it's just press it right down. And this will line up our window. Then I will put strong adhesive on the other end of that stamped rectangle piece. That's again double-sided tape. And then I'll press that up at the top of the card panel. So again, nothing's folded. It's that rectangle stamp piece is completely flat. It just has those markings so you know where to put the glue. And there you can see it slides up and down nicely. And then, of course, I will do the same thing for the third window. Not going to show it this time because at this point, this video is super long as is. But let's take a look at the back of this. You can see those 3 mechanisms for the sliding effect are all in the back. They're not touching each other because the dies perfectly space them out. And you can see our rectangle pieces are all vertical and lined up. I will place double-sided adhesive above and below those windows, but you don't want to go anywhere near those moving sleeves that we added, and you don't want to go between the windows, just above and below. You could use stacked pieces of cardstock here. I just went with foam tape to save some time. I like to put my foam tape close together so it's nice and strong and doesn't get crushed in the mail. So there you can see nothing is hindering the movement of those little sleeves. Now I can remove the release paper from this and add it to a note card. This is made from Concord and 9th Harbor cardstock, which matches the stamping we did in the windows. And that note card is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And let's test it out. Look at how easily those little windows move up and down. For some reason, I really wanted to put a pop of red on the front of this card, so I used the Simon Says Stamp Mini Hearts Party Die. It's over there on the left. It cuts a bunch of hearts of 3 different sizes, and they're great to use as accents on cards. I use it a lot in videos. I went a little overboard. I ended up putting 6 little red hearts on here, but I just really liked the red, especially when the windows were closed. It added a little bit of interest. I did stamp that little heart and plane on the inside of the card. And here you can see how the windows slide up and down very easily. So you could stamp different greetings in there. You could stamp different images in the window. Lots of things that you can do. But I thought it'd be fun to take the opportunity to add additional sentiments in each of the windows. And remember, you can use the same die set to create a landscape card or a horizontal card with 4 windows, or you could get creative and do a slimline card and have even more windows going across. All right, let's create a second card. This time I'm not using a specialty die set. Instead, I'm just making a regular die set work as an interactive card. This is a great way to stretch your supplies. When I saw the sunglasses die set from Concord and 9th, I thought it'd be fun to make the sentiment change in that center pair of sunglasses. So you could do this with circle dies or a rectangle die, any shape die you want. You just want to do your die cut window towards the center. I'm demonstrating this with Concord and 9th Spectacular Shades die set. There is also a stamp set that coordinates. And look at all these different shades that you can create. So I have a white cardstock panel here that is 4 by 5 1/4 inches, and I have die cut 3 pairs of sunglasses from holographic cardstock. I love how they sparkle. Now I need to make my windows towards the center of the card. You don't want it too high or too low because you need room for that movement. So the center is always a good place to start. So I drew a pencil line at the center to help me tape temporarily my first pair of sunglasses. I will take one of the heart lenses dies and pop it right into the opening of that die cut and then run it through my die cut machine. And I'll do the same thing at the other. This is creating 2 heart windows that fit right inside of those sunglasses very nicely. So now I have these 2 heart windows, and this is where our sentiment will change. I wanted to add some detail to this background, so I'm using the double stripe card front die. This is like that cloudy one from before and lets you put stripes on a horizontal or vertical card panel. And I just thought that fun detail pattern would be fun in the background. It also would have been good to do that first because it would have helped me center things up, but I didn't think of it at the time. Next, I have die cut the sunglasses from 2 pieces of white cardstock and glued the holographic one on top of that. So I have the stack dimension, and I'm adhering that right to the front of our card panel. I will do the same with the other sunglasses, 1 set above and 1 set below. So again, it's 2 white die cuts and 1 holographic die cut, all glued together for that stack dimension, but you could do 1 layer if you prefer. Now for the sunglasses at the top and the bottom, I'm adding in some rainbow details. Remember that die cuts those fun rainbow pieces, so I was able to use some scraps and put them to use. Okay, now that our card panel is finished with those windows in the center, it's time to create the panel, that black panel that will slide up and down. So I cut a piece of black cardstock to be 3.5 inches wide, so just a bit wider than the openings of those sunglasses. Just want a little bit wider. And this piece is 5.5 inches tall, but I'll end up trimming it later. So this piece will slide up and down behind the window heart openings. I also cut a piece of white cardstock to the same size, and you'll see why in a moment. All right, now I'm going to take a little stopper. I need to create a stopper so that when the person pulls this panel up, it doesn't come out of the card. So I just used a piece of scrap yellow cardstock so you could better see it in the video. And I'm just cutting it so it sticks out a little bit on the left and right bottom of this black piece. Really doesn't matter how much, you just want it to hide behind your card. So I'm going to hold this behind my card and see if I need to trim it. Turns out it is too long, it sticks out the sides. So I'll trim both sides a little bit shorter. But basically this is a little stopper to keep this black panel from sliding out of the card entirely. Okay, now I'll hold this behind those windows so that yellow stopper is just below the bottom of the windows. So I'm holding it back there, and then I'll put some temporary tape to hold it centered there and so that it won't shift. I will then flip it over and use a pencil to trace inside of those heart windows. This is the spot where my second sentiments will go, that when you pull the tab, this is what you'll see. And there you can see those hearts are just above that yellow stopper. All right, now we need to figure out the first position. where I need to put my sentiments for the closed version of the card. So I'm just going to put that piece behind there and slide it down so that I can trace onto it hearts just above the hearts we've already traced. So I'm just going to shift it up enough that I don't see the pencil hearts through the opening on the front of the card. So there you can see it's lined up on the back, and then I will again trace inside of those hearts. So now we have 4 heart openings. Now, if you wanted to, make this simpler, you could definitely just use a circle and it would be one circle above another. Many ways you can do this. I'm just wanting to show you kind of the thought process so you could do this with supplies you have. And I have another video with a similar technique, and I'll link to it at the end of this video. Now there are these dies that cut the words love you in that heart shape, and I'm lining them up with the top heart pencil lines that I did and running that through my die cut machine. And there you can see it cuts out the letters love you. So this is where that white piece comes into play. That white piece was cut to the same size as the black, and I'm just gluing it to the back here so that the white shows through. I could have done like glued the little letters on top of the black. That would have taken too long. This was super fast, and now I have love you in those top heart openings. Okay, so now we need to do the sentiments for the bottom hearts. I'm again taking the opportunity to dig through some of my older supplies, and here I have the Concord and 9th Playful Pieces die and this little stamp set that coordinates. It has these smaller sentiments that fit really nicely in those heart-shaped windows. So I chose 2 of them that I'm lining up inside of our pencil hearts, and then I will stamp them with Versamark ink and white heat emboss. After I've heat embossed, I can wipe away the excess powder that's on the black cardstock and use the eraser to erase the pencil lines. And now we have the sentiment shift when we pull up the top of that black piece. So now let's glue this to our card base. I'm putting the black panel behind its first position, the closed position, which is the love you. I will hold it there and then tape it temporarily in place so that I can put my foam tape on it and it doesn't shift. Now this foam tape is normally wider. I just cut it right down the center to make it narrow, and I put that right up against the bottom edge of our slider piece. Now we'll move the slider piece to the second position where the heat embossed sentiments show through. I will hold it there, and I'll put a piece of tape up here so it doesn't shift, and flip it over. Now we need to put foam tape along the sides, but only up to that stopper. So I cut really thin foam tape and I'll put it right up against the yellow stopper sticking out at the bottom of our slider piece. So you can see the foam stops right up against that little yellow piece sticking out on the bottom of our slider piece. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm not going to put any other foam tape back here because it'll hinder the movement of that slider, and this is plenty. If you don't want to use foam tape, again, you could use stacks of thin strips of cardstock. Maybe 2 or 3 would be enough. All right, so let's remove the release paper, and I will add this onto a top folding black note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I will then remove that piece of temporary tape and we'll test it out to make sure the slider works, and there, it works great. So I'll put it in the closed position and trim the black piece to be shorter. We don't need it sticking out that much. I like to use a corner chomper to round the corners of these pieces to just give it kind of a finished look up there, but you could skip that if you want. Off screen, I clear heat embossed the word pull from that My Favorite Things stamp set at the top of that panel, but you could skip that also, or just use a white gel pen and write the word pull. Now on the inside, I added a white cardstock panel and stamped a sentiment from the coordinating stamp set that's available for this die set. So here you can see the finished card, lots of color, lots of sparkle, lots of dimension. And when you pull that tab at the top, you get more sentiments. It'd be fun to put maybe photos so that when you pull this, a little photo shows up in the bottom. Just cut a heart-shaped photo and glue it in there. Lots of things you could do with this design. And you could use this with a variety of other designs. Again, I have done a similar technique with different shapes, such as a basic rectangle, and I will link to that video up here in the top right and at the end of this one. It's just good to see lots of examples so you can use what you have in a similar way. Okay, now I'm going back to the Plain Amazing die set that I used on my first card, and I'm going to use some of the other dies in the die set creatively to create my own interactive card. So this is all about looking at one die set and finding many ways to use it. I'll be using that Plain Amazing die set. I'll show it to you again here, but you could do this card with a set of oval dies or circle dies if you prefer. Now on the back here, you can see there are many ways you can assemble scenes showing through this window. I'm going to go with a beach scene today because it goes with the sentiment I plan to use. In this set, there are 4 large window dies. I'm using the smallest of the 4 and cutting it towards the center of a white cardstock panel, just a little bit up, not too much. Just a little extra room there on the bottom for our stamped sentiment. I did use pencil lines to make sure I got it straight. Next, I cut this white piece from the largest window die, and I want to make it so that this opens and closes, but look at it, goes too far down that it doesn't stick out the top of the card for you to grab a hold of. And I wanted to make it longer. So I'm taking this large window die, and I'm going to do some partial die cutting. So I'm just putting on a piece of white cardstock here and taping it, and then I will put it between my die cut plates so that the top cutting plate doesn't cover the entire die. It's only cutting up to where it starts to curve at the top. So anything under this cutting plate will cut. Anything sticking out from the cutting plate won't cut. And I'm doing this with my Anna Griffin Empress die cut machine, but you could do it with whatever machine you have. So you can see it's partially cut. Now I will use my trimmer to extend that line along the side of this partial die cut. Now, you don't have to do it this way. You could definitely just use the regular oval. I'll talk about that later. But if you want a tab to pull on the top, I found this gave the best results. All right, so that is a great way to extend a die cut piece. So now I can have this come up and down, and it looks like the window shade opening on our plain window. Using the largest of the window dies in that set, I die cut from blue cardstock, and on that oval there, I'm gluing a beach scene. Now, all of these dies are included in that Plain Amazing die set. You could do a mountain scene, beach scene, so many different things that you can do. They even came out with cloud enamel dots that would be fun in here. I didn't use them today, but they're worth checking out. I'll link to them below. I just used the little dies included in that set, and you could use these little scene dies for other theme cards too. So after I assembled that entire oval, I'm gluing it towards the top center of a blue note card. This is Harbor cardstock. It's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I then cut a piece of acetate, just something thin. This was just from recycling, and I am taping it over that scene onto the front of this note card. That way, when we have the slider, that white slider piece going up and down, it doesn't get hooked on those die cuts as it slides past. And also that acetate adds to the window feel of it. So now it's got that shine that looks like a window. And look at the slider piece won't get stuck on those little die cut pieces. Next, I wanted to create a little frame for that window on the front of our card. So I'm using the largest and the second smallest of the window dies in that set. And I cut it from fog cardstock, and I'm just gluing that right around the window opening on the front of our card panel. And then I also created a thinner frame using the 2 smallest window dies together from fog cardstock. I like how they made those dies separately so you can cut how you want and really make the most of this die set. Now, you hear me talk in videos a lot about how I'll go through my older stash to find sentiments that work well with newer products I'm using. And this one from Bright Eyes stamp set, there's a stamp set on the right, I thought was great. It says, "Let's pretend we're at the beach together." And I thought this would be super fun for this plain window card. So I stamped that with black ink on the front panel, and now it's time to put everything together. I'm taking my sliding piece and putting it in the closed position behind our window panel, and I'll just put some tape there just so it doesn't shift as we do this. Then I place some foam tape below that, so right up against the edge of the bottom of that slider piece. So that foam tape will keep the sliding piece from sliding out the bottom of the card, but remember we need to create that stopper to keep the sliding piece from coming out of the top of the card. So I have a piece of cardstock scrap here, and I'm gluing it close to the bottom of that window that's going to slide up and down. You could go right along the bottom edge, it's up to you. I just put it up a little bit this time and trimmed the ends a bit. You don't want that to stick out the side of your cards. And there you can see it is hidden. Okay, so now I am going to tape this at its topmost position, the open position. So I want the window to stop right about there. So I will put some tape on there to hold it in place. And then we can put the rest of the foam tape on the back. I'll put a thin strip of foam tape down the side and then a tiny little bit of foam tape right there above the stopper. So this stopper goes close to the top of the card, but not all the way. So there's room there for a little piece of foam tape to stop the sliding part from coming out of the card. So then I'll put foam tape on the other side, and again, a tiny piece of foam tape there at the top to keep the sliding piece from coming out. So let me show you a closer look at that top there. You can see how the stopper that we added, that white cardstock scrap goes straight up against those little foam pieces there at the top. So there are many ways you can do this. This time, this panel goes up much farther outside of the card than the last example, but you just want to play around with it. You could make it so that the panel just slides right out. It really doesn't matter. Totally up to you. Okay, so now I will remove the temporary tape, and I'm going to hold all this together and add it to the front of our note card that we created before that has our beach scene and that little bit of acetate. Once again, I will trim that slider piece a bit shorter so that when it's in the closed position, it only sticks out a little bit. And I'll use a corner rounder to smooth those edges. You don't have to do that. And you can stamp pull up there if you prefer, and I'll stamp that with black ink. I also cut a white cardstock panel to go on the inside of the card, and I want to stamp a miss you sentiment towards the top center. So I'm using the grid that's behind my grip mat, and right in the center of the A2 rectangle, towards the top center, I'm placing a miss you sentiment. It's small, but I'm placing it right onto the grip mat. This allows me to make sure I have it centered. I will then place my white cardstock panel inside of that A2 rectangle and stamp my sentiment with black ink, and that way I know that my sentiment is centered on there. That's one of the other advantages of this grip mat from Waffle Flower with the grid mat stuck behind it. Again, I'll have a video with much more information on that linked up here on the top right. All right, so now this gets glued to the inside of our card, and there's plenty of room to write a personal message underneath. So let's take a look at the completed card. When you pull the tab, you have that fun beach scene inside. You could add, if you wanted to, a sentiment right there on the window shade, right there in the center. And then when you push it up, you see the sentiment up above the card. So that's another thing you could do, or maybe put a red heart there. I decided to leave it plain. Now, if you wanted to, instead of having a pull tab at the top, you could have just done the window sliding feature like we did on the first card, where the person slides the handle up and the window would just come at the top and you could have a sentiment up there. Many ways you could do this, but I wanted to do the pull tab this time. I might try the other version in a future video. All right, so there are a few interactive cards for you. Now, I wanted to show you some other products that I think would be fun for interactive cards, just to give you more ideas, so hopefully you have something similar in your stash. So this is the Concord and 9th Pretty Sweet Bundle. There's a stamp set and die set sold together or separately. Creates these adorable ice cream cones or bouquets of flowers. You can see the examples there. I thought this would be a fun interactive card where you kind of pull the ice cream off of the cone and a sentiment's underneath. If you want a video with ideas similar to that, I will link to up here on the top right and in my description below. And I think it would work great with this set. I also love this new die set from Concord and 9th with sentiments. I thought it'd be fun to do a rectangle window, and when it's closed, you see hello, and then when you pull the tab up, the word friend is revealed. So it'd be kind of similar to the sunglasses card that I did earlier, but with a rectangle window instead of the hearts. And as I mentioned in that other video I did with interactive cards that are similar, I did do a rectangle window. So you could check that out to see how to use this. All right, there you have it. 3 different interactive cards. I hope this gets your creative juices flowing. If you're interested in everything I used today, it's linked below in my YouTube description. At the end here, I'll link to a couple of those other videos. Thanks for spending all this time with me, and I hope you have a great day.